Every company that eventually collapses can usually trace its failure back to the same root cause, not bad luck, not unfair competition, but a leader who stopped making deliberate decisions and started simply reacting to whatever crossed their desk that day. And here's what almost nobody applies to their own life. You are running an organization too, a single, irreplaceable one. And most people are operating it with far less discipline than they'd tolerate from the person running their favorite company. You wouldn't invest in a business whose leadership made every major decision on impulse, with no review process, no clear priorities, and no accountability to anyone. Yet that's precisely how most people run their own lives, and it's costing them more than they realize. Today, I want to hand you the actual mindset, piece by piece, that separates a life run with genuine executive discipline from one simply drifting from one reaction to the next. Section 1. You are the CEO of exactly one company. The first shift is simply accepting the framing seriously instead of treating it as a clever metaphor you nod at and forget. You are the chief executive of a single organization, your own life, and like any real company, it has finite resources, competing priorities, and a long-term trajectory that either compounds towards something meaningful or slowly erodes through neglect. A capable CEO doesn't treat every incoming request with equal urgency, doesn't say yes simply because saying no feels uncomfortable, and doesn't let the loudest voice in the room automatically set the agenda. They ask consistently whether a given decision actually serves the organization's real direction. And they're willing to disappoint people in the short term to protect that direction over the long term. Most people never apply this standard to themselves. They let their calendar, their inbox, and other people's expectations quietly become the acting CEO of their life, while they occupy the office in name only, reacting instead of actually leading. The shift begins the moment you stop asking what's urgent and start asking, deliberately, what actually serves the organization you're responsible for. Section 2. Separating the executive from the operator. Here's a distinction that changes everything once you actually internalize it. Inside any functioning company, there's a difference between operator work, the daily execution, the emails, the tasks, the immediate fires, and executive work, the stepping back to decide direction. Evaluate whether current effort is actually producing the intended results, and make the harder calls that operator-level thinking never has the altitude to see clearly. Most people spend nearly all their time trapped entirely in operator mode, moving from task to task, reacting to whatever's immediately in front of them, without ever stepping into the executive role that's supposed to be evaluating whether all that operator effort is actually pointed in a direction worth pursuing. This is precisely why busy people can stay busy for years without meaningfully progressing. They're excellent operators, executing tasks efficiently, but nobody, including themselves, is occupying the executive seat, asking the harder question of whether this is actually the right set of tasks to be executing at all. Deliberately scheduling time in the executive role, stepping back regularly to evaluate direction rather than simply executing within it, is one of the most consistently underused practices in how people run their own lives. Section 3. Every choice is capital allocation. A serious CEO understands that every decision, every dollar, every hour of the team's attention is a form of capital allocation. And capital allocated toward one thing is capital that cannot simultaneously go toward something else. This same logic applies with total precision to your own life. Your time, your energy, your focus are the actual capital you're allocating every single day, whether you're doing so deliberately or simply by default. A capable CEO doesn't allocate resources based on whatever feels most urgent or most emotionally satisfying in the moment. They evaluate the actual expected return relative to what the organization is trying to build. And they're willing to say no to attractive-looking opportunities that don't actually serve that direction. This means treating your own choices with the same discipline, asking honestly what a given commitment of your time and energy is actually likely to produce, relative to the alternative uses of that same time and energy, rather than defaulting to whatever request happens to land in front of you first. Most people allocate their personal capital reactively, the way a poorly run company allocates its budget, chasing whatever's loudest rather than what's actually strategically sound. And the compounding cost of that reactive allocation is precisely why so many hardworking people end up years into effort that never actually built toward anything coherent. Section 4. Building accountability without a boss. One of the quiet advantages a CEO has, ironically, is genuine accountability, aboard investors. A clear set of metrics that make it obvious when performance is slipping and difficult to simply ignore the problem indefinitely. Most people running their own lives have no equivalent structure at all, no external accountability forcing an honest look at whether their own trajectory is actually working. Which means drift can continue for years, entirely unchecked, simply because nobody with real authority is asking the hard questions. The solution is building that accountability deliberately, even without an external board demanding it. This might mean a regular, scheduled review of your own direction, treating it with the same seriousness a company treats its quarterly review. Or it might mean finding people in your life willing to ask you honest, sometimes uncomfortable questions about whether your current path is actually producing what you say you want. Without some version of this structure, self-accountability tends to quietly dissolve the moment things get comfortable. Because there's no external pressure forcing the honest evaluation that comfort naturally discourages you from doing on your own. Section 5. Knowing what to delegate and what to eliminate. A CEO who insists on personally handling every single task in the company isn't demonstrating dedication. They're demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of their actual role. And the company suffers for it because the highest value executive thinking never gets the attention it requires. The same principle applies personally, and it requires an honest inventory of where your time is actually going, separating what genuinely requires your specific judgment from what could be delegated, automated, simplified, or eliminated entirely without meaningfully damaging what actually matters. Most people never conduct this inventory seriously. They simply keep doing everything themselves out of habit, guilt, or the mistaken belief that handling every detail personally is somehow more responsible, when in reality it often means the highest value thinking, the actual executive work only you can do, gets crowded out by lower value tasks that could have been handled another way entirely. This isn't about becoming lazy or avoiding effort. It's about directing your specific, limited capacity toward the decisions and work that genuinely require it, rather than spreading that same finite capacity evenly across everything regardless of its actual importance. Section 6. Deciding without perfect information. Real CEOs almost never have complete information when a genuinely important decision needs to be made, and the ones who succeed aren't the ones who wait for certainty that will never arrive. They're the ones who have built the discipline to gather what information is reasonably available, then commit fully, while remaining genuinely willing to adjust course as new information emerges. Most people without any external pressure forcing a decision default to endless deliberation, mistaking the feeling of continued analysis for genuine progress. When in reality, prolonged indecision is itself a decision, usually the decision to let the default outcome happen simply because a deliberate choice was never actually made in time. Building this kind of executive courage means accepting, honestly, that waiting for perfect certainty on anything meaningful is a losing strategy. Because meaningful decisions almost never come with the level of certainty an anxious mind is quietly hoping to receive before committing. The actual skill isn't eliminating uncertainty. That's not possible. It's becoming genuinely comfortable deciding well within it, the same way any capable leader eventually has to. Closing. Taking the seat you've always held. You've been the CEO of your own life this entire time, whether you've been occupying that seat deliberately or simply letting it sit empty while you operated reactively in the background. Nothing about this requires external permission or some formal title. It requires a decision, renewed regularly, to actually step into the role you already hold. Evaluating direction instead of just executing tasks, allocating your finite time and energy the way a serious steward would rather than reacting to whatever feels loudest. Building real accountability instead of letting drift go unchecked indefinitely, knowing honestly what deserves your personal attention and what doesn't. And deciding decisively even when the information in front of you is incomplete, because it always will be. The company you're responsible for is small in the sense that it's just one life, but it's also the only one you'll ever run, and it deserves the same seriousness, discipline, and deliberate direction you'd expect from anyone entrusted with something genuinely worth protecting. That seat has been waiting for you the entire time. The only real question left is whether you're finally ready to actually sit in it.